Just a quick message from me before we get the video going. I'm still very new to this, so if there's any reason you didn't like the video, if you just put the reason why in the comments, then that's very useful feedback from me, and I can work on that and we can look to progress that in the future. No beef from me. Whatever you got to say, shove it down there. Anyway, on with the video. Hello my devilish demons, and join me today for your Destiny 2 video of the day. We're going to be looking at what I use when I'm doing Lost Sectors Master. So solo Lost Sectors, we're going to be doing with a Warlock, and we're going to be covering my top build for every surge. So let's jump in. So starting on solar, I really do like the sun races here. So what we're looking for is to make the most out of our melee, and then we're going to be turning that into instant grenades. So the fragments that I use for this, I've got Ember of Sealing, so defeating scorched targets grants melee energy, so of course keep that melee energy up. Powered melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant, so you've got the damage boosts there as well every time you use your melee. Solar Grenade final blows cure you, so we got our healing there. And Ember of Ashes, so you apply more scorch stacks to targets. That's just helping your melee be more powerful and creating the explosions, so we can get our infinite grenades going there. So Touch of Flame for me is a must on this, because you're going to be using a lot of solar grenades, and they increase the linger duration, and they emit blobs of lava around its perimeter. So for me, these all stack up very nicely into the build. I do use heat risers because I do like a little bit of get out of jail free card, being able to use my grenade to, again, give me back my health, but very optional of what you're using in this last con, in my opinion. You have to have solar grenades on. And Snap I like because it does a lot more damage, but it is a bit problematic in stuff like Grandmasters because it doesn't have very much range on that. As for mods, so for the arms, I've got that we use our melee, our armor charges get used and we get back melee energy, so again that's going back into getting me as much melee as possible. Momentum transfer, so causing damage with your grenade reduces your melee cooldown, so again ensuring that we can do as many powerful melees as we possibly can. And I use firepower because if you're killing a lot of things, you're going to be killing them when you're throwing your grenades. So I do use this rather than the heavy-handed, because you generally only need like one kill to proc this, and then you're going to get loads of kills with your melee, so you're a lot more likely to create orbs through that. And as for the boots, the only way I'm using my orbs is again to get my melee back. It's a nice and simple build there. Some races, high strength, decent discipline on there, just to keep that cycle going and to ensure that you can keep getting your melees back. I do see a lot of people overplaying this, and they will use a dive to scorch a target first before they do a melee, but you don't actually need to defeat it with an ignition. It just needs to dive from the powerful melee attack. So in Master Lost Sectors, most red bars will actually dive from one powered melee anyway, and if they don't, you just shoot them with a bullet first, then powerful melee them, and then you can get it going. So you don't need to complex it so much with dives to start those ignitions, in my opinion. And just one little advice is, if you are using the grenades a lot against one big enemy, resist the temptation of throwing a lot directly at him, and you want to try and make a little circle around so the blobs are coming into the middle and hurting him on there. So that is my Sunbracers build. Increase the duration of solar grenades. Solar melee kills grant unlimited solar energy for a brief time on there. Okay, so moving on to Strand, I utilise the Swarmers, so we're making the most out of our Threadlings here. So I would use Strand Weapon Final Blows, have a chance to create Threadlings, so very good synergy with Strand Weapons there, making those Threadlings. Dealing damage generates grenade energy, we'll come on to that in a sec. Threadlings travel further and deal additional damage, so again we're boosting our Threadlings with that. And picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail. So again, not healing, but Woven Mail is very overpowered and gives you such high damage resistance. I think it's a must on a lot of Strand builds on there. I think a must as well is Mind Spun Invocation. because what I'm going to be using for this is the threadling grenade, which gives you 3 threadlings if you throw it. But if you consume it, it'll put 5 threadlings attached to you. So as you're shooting your weapons, those threadlings will come off. So you get much more value out of your grenades on that. I also do use the Wanderer. So tangles you throw attached to targets, detonate into a suspending burst, and destroying a tangle creates a suspending burst. Because I'm not using the shackle grenades, this gives me a use for shackling people. It's very good to string them up on there, but I would say that again, this is optional. Weaver's cool, works very good in PvP for me as well. So again, it's using a lot more threadlings there, so I would say switch between these two, and that's very much a matter of opinion. But for me, these other parts are very big must on that. So as for our abilities, mods, I use grenade kickstart, so consume the grenade, or armor charges get turned back into grenades. So it's keeping those 5 threadlings that we can keep making onto ourselves rotate. So beautiful there. But the issue is you're not going to be getting damage from the grenade because you're not going to be throwing it. When you consume and use it on you, those threadlings don't then count as grenade damage when they're killing things. So we're causing damage with a melee attack, reduces your grenade cooldown. So again, we're getting into that cooldown. And rather than double stacking impact, I've gone for focusing strike. So this grants class ability when using my melee. So every time we're using our melee, we're getting back both charges there. And the reason for that is because on my on my class item, I've got Bombardier. So I'm getting that class ability to make rifts, and then I can turn those rifts again into getting that grenade back. So again, what we're looking to do here is to make the most out of our grenades and to have them continually. And the big reason for that is the swarm is here. Destroying a tangle spawns a threadling. Your threadlings unravel targets that they damage. So unravel, very good as well. Good debuff on your enemies, and you can keep this one going. Very good consistency. I've got just healing from the orbs, and I've got double strand to make the most use out of my strand weapons. But if you are dying a lot, or you do want more of a cycle, you could put in absolution into this to make the most out of those orbs there. So I'd say that was a bit optional on there. Again, if you're doing very well, and you don't need the second healing here because your Woven Mail is doing everything for you, then I would probably put on Innovation or Invigoration, get that grenade or melee energy there. So very flexible there of how you're finding this build. If you're that's how you're turning it essentially to be more aggressive or to be more defensive. It's just do slight tweaks on these mods here. So strand, swarmers, make the most out of your threadlings. And the grenade that gives you 5 threadlings is a lot of threadlings to have. So essentially the cycle that we're using here for strand is that we are consuming our grenades that are putting the threadlings on us. We're then using a strand weapon as much as we can to play into that. And the threadlings will come off with the weapon. We're using our melee and our rifts to get back our grenade energy quicker. And then you're just continually cycling the threadlings through and through on this build. Okay, so for Void, we're using Controverse Hold. So we're going to be abusing our Void grenades here. So the aspects that I'm using for this is Echo of Vigilance. So defeating a target while your shields are depleted grants you temporary Void Overshield. So very good for survivability there. We've got Echo Remnants, so your lingering grenade effects. So we're going to be using Vortex grenades because they pull things in. Very powerful grenade to have. And it also buffs through the Echo of Remnants as well. So good synergy there. We've got Echo of Undermining, so your Void grenades weaken targets. Very big debuffed discipline on this one. But I do love having this because throwing the grenades, you get lots of grenades, you're weakening everything on the field. It's pulling everything into a single ball for you. So you throw it, they pull them in, and you've got all these enemies here in one place. So a grenade launcher, anything that's doing sort of splash damage, you're going to be not only doing the splash damage, but you're going to be increasing damage against everything that it's pulling into itself. And defeating targets with grenade grants volatile rounds to avoid weapons. So again, we're making the most out of our grenades there to boost everything else we have around us. The aspects I'm using is Feed the Void, so defeat a target with a void ability to activate Devour. So again, this is another healing aspect, so we're essentially doubling up on survivability there, so we can be very aggressive with this build. And Chaos of Accelerant, so not much to explain there. It just gives you a more powerful grenades by holding the grenade on there. So the stats that we're looking at here is the only really important one is Discipline. You might find it a little bit hard to get a lot of other things into this because the minus on the stats, having -10 recovery, -20 discipline, you're going to have to cover for that, and you still want to have such a high discipline. So essentially, I've had to have to make this work as best as I can. I've got armor sets which give me 120 discipline. So how are we using the mods? So on the arms, we've got grenade kickstart. So we use our grenades, we get that grenade energy. We're going to be making orbs from our grenades, and our grenades are going to be buffing our rifts. The reason I've buffed rifts is because, again, on the class item, I've got the rifts buff grenades. So we've got a nice little cycle there. So we're going to use our grenades, going to give us more rift energy. Going to use our rift, which gives us more grenade energy on there. And as for the boots, where I'm making the use of the orbs here is, again, just to get back the grenade energy. I don't need any healing here because we're getting a lot of healing from our aspects and our fragments. I've gone for orbs of restoration, mainly because I wanted to throw a recovery mod into this. But if you could put a 3 mod into here, Absolution I think does work better on there. But for me, orbs of restoration or Absolution, you can take it or leave it if you do need a 4 mod in this slot. So let's have a look at Controverse Hold. So resist incoming damage while charging your Void Grenade. Charge Void Grenades return grenade energy on hit. So if you're hitting 3 or 4 targets with this build and you pick up the orbs that drops, you have continual grenade. You throw a grenade, pick up the orb, and by then you'll have your grenade back again. Charge it up, throw it out, pick up the orb, charge it up, throw it out, pick up the orb. On that, you're weakening everything, you're getting overshields from everything, you can have continual devour on this, just basically abusing those grenades. And let's remember, as I said, with the grenades we were using as well, sucking them in is beautiful there. So that is the gameplay loop for the Void solo that I use. Okay, so for stasis, I'm using Osmomancy gloves. I generally don't use a lot of stasis in solo play. Grandmasters, 3-player content, this is a very good build, but I have slightly tweaked it from the way I use it there for solo use, just to be able to keep the grenades going continually on there. So as for our aspects and fragments, we're using Whisper of Torment, so you gain grenade energy each time you take damage from targets, so getting our grenade back. Collecting a stasis shard creates a small amount of overshield, which falls off after 10 seconds. Collecting additional shards adds to the overshield. So with stasis, you create stasis shards, and every time you're freezing a target, you create a load of these. So you're going to be picking these up at an extremely fast rate. So we want to make what we can out of those, and that's why I'm using that aspect. Whisper of Shard, so shattering a stasis crystal, simply boosts your grenade recharge rate. Shattering additional stasis crystals increase the duration of the benefit. So again, this is just about getting our grenade energy back, and also having +10 resilience, as resilience is so important, is a beautiful little added thing onto that. So nearby stasis shards track to your position. It's useful just so you don't have to move too much out of cover. Things are coming to you, you're not having to run around to them and change your path. And again, having +10 resilience is such a nice buff to have additionally on top of that. So we have freezing targets create stasis shards around the frozen targets. So again, we're creating more of those shards that I was saying that earlier, and there is a reason for that, and we'll come on to that in a sec. And ice flare bolts. So shattering a frozen target spawns seekers that track and freeze other nearby targets. You freeze a guy, shoot him, things will fly out from him, and they're going to freeze everything else around him. The slight tweak here is that when playing more end game content, I would generally, with a team, use Bleaker Watchers, because then I can throw my grenade out and I can be more useful to the team without having to continually throw a grenade. But in solo content, I find that just being able to throw the grenades and continually be using the grenades in that way really is a great thing to have on there compared to the turrets. Because in lost sectors, you're not really going to be in one room for a long time. So being able to utilize the grenades and continually throw them is a lot more of a benefit to me than Bleaker Watcher. When you're playing Grandmasters, you might be clearing a room out for a minute, 2 minutes on there. So the turrets work a lot better on that because you don't need to worry about continually throwing them. So as for the aspects, gone for pure grenade kickstarts here. If you do need to weave this down a little bit, what you'd essentially do is you'd make the most out of your melee, because you're not really doing that much damage from your grenades because they're freezing things more than they are damaging them. So if you didn't want to go for such an extreme build here, I would pop it in. Melee gives you your grenade energy and melee gives rift energy. And then, of course, on my class item, I would have bomber to get back that grenade energy from your rifts. So then your melee energy and your rift energy are both giving you back your grenades. So I do run it this way, but I do sometimes flick down, and also it does mean that you can have a better stat mod in there. But you are quite buffed by that 20 resilience that you already got there. It does take a lot of a strain off the build. As for the boots, what we're making the most out of, so because you make so many stasis shards on stasis, this for me is a must. So this is going to turn those stasis shards into your armor charges, because you're going to get so many of them. Essentially, it's almost going to replace orbs for you in this role. And I've got stacks on stacks to make the most out of it, because essentially I'm just purely churning grenade energy to keep throwing out grenades on there. And as you see, we've got innovation to make the most out of the orbs to give us grenades energy. So what the gloves do is your cold snap grenades have additional charge. The recharge is quicker on direct impact. So this is the reason I don't use turrets in single player, is to make use of the fact that when throwing the grenades, I get a boost to my recovery of grenades. But when you're turning them into turrets and the turrets are freezing things, that doesn't count as direct impact. The Seeker spawn from cold snap grenades travel further. So again, we were utilising that in our fragments and aspects on there. So the gameplay loop of this is to be very, very aggressive. You want to be throwing a grenade down, that's freezing things, and then you want to be making the most out of everything that's freezing around it. You want to be killing things before they're coming out of their frost. If not, you're just throwing down another grenade and going after that again there. So you should be able to continually pretty much throw grenades with this. So if you are running something like Demolitionist, that's going to be beautiful for you, because you're just going to be continually reloading that weapon on there. And finally, we're going to end with Arc. It's my least favourite to run solo content on, and I will do 2 builds for this. So I use Geomag boots, but you have to be so aggressive with Geomag boots. Essentially what you're saying here is that my super is going to be the most important thing. I'm going to melt things with that super around there, and we're going to utilise grenades to get as much super as we can on there. So as for the fragments we're going for, I've used Spark of Amplitude. Rapidly defeating targets while you're amplified creates an orb of power. And of course those orbs of power are going to feed into giving us back abilities, and they're going to give us super, and our abilities we're going to use to get supers. We'll come on to that in a sec. Defeating a jolted target creates an ionic trace. So Spark of Ions is our next fragment on there. So this synergizes very nicely with Spark of Shock. So your arc grenades jolt targets. So every time we're using a grenade, we're jolting a target. Every time we jolt a target, we create an ionic trace, and we're going to turn that ionic traces into armor charges. Spark of Magnitude, so you're lingering grenades. So grenades, we're making the most use of our grenades. I really like storm grenades from them, the way that I play, everything like that. They do fit in really nicely. But pulse grenades, fine, flux grenades. You can make a use out of the grenade that works for you essentially on there. But you generally for me, I want to use something that's going to buff with Spark of Magnitude. So we've got Electrostatic Mine, defeating your targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets creates an ionic trace. So again, we're just making sure that every time we're jolting something or we're blinding them, we're making those ionic traces from that. And Arc Soul, so cast your Rift to create an Arc Soul. So that's a little turret that sits on your shoulder, and it's just very useful for taking care of those little mobs. And if you're being a little bit aggressive and you're shooting something, it's not nearly dead, you move on to something else, then that generally will take care of it for you. You can use Lightning Surge if you want to be extremely aggressive with this, but I do generally find there's a lack of healing staying alive in the arc build, so I generally don't use that on there. So the way that I'm staying alive is by making the most out of the armor charges. So I've got recuperation. Of course, you can use better already, whichever one fits your playstyle better on there. But I would say that is a must for an arc build, because there's no way really through the fragments and aspects keep the healing going. So you're going to have to keep breaking to heal yourself back if you want to play this aggressively. I've got Absolution on just to reduce everything down. But again, you could put a grenade on there if you needed to make this a 4 stack. Or if you wanted to be very aggressive, you could throw on a weapon surge. But generally, we're going to be using a grenade a lot because we'll be using Geomags. And the Geomags basically extend your Chaos Reach. So as you're hitting some of the Chaos Reach, you can hit it for longer. So it's making the most out of that super. So Elemental Charge, because we're going to be creating so many Ionic Traces, we want to make use out of those. They're going to give you buffs anyway, but with this, you're also going to get armor charges on top of that. And the way that we're utilizing our armor charges is with grenades. So grenade kickstart, throw your grenade, get your grenade energy back. We're going to be creating orbs with our grenades, and every time we do damage with our grenades, we're going to get back our ability energy. And the reason for that, again, Deja Vu, is our rifts then gives back grenades. So we're looping those two things there together very nicely on that. The one other thing that is a must is on the helmet is Ashes to Assets. So because we want to be utilizing our super as much as we can, saving on heavy ammo, coming clutch when you need to melt something. With champions, you want to stun them, and as soon as they're stunned, just use your super, and you'll melt them down. And you'll even have ammo charge left to spin around the room and kill whatever else you want on there. But essentially, because we're going to be using so many grenades, and our super is very important to us, we're going to be looping those two things together. So as you can see, the gameplay loop for this is, it's not as fun and it's not as aggressive as other builds. It's why I don't generally use it a lot more than others. It's very much a very vanilla build. You generally want to be playing sensible. You're throwing your grenades out. You're utilizing the grenades as much as you can. And your ionic traces are coming from that, which give you speed on there. But you kind of have to balance that survivability, because the only way we really have any survivability here is through the orbs. Okay, I did say I would throw in an alternative arc. And this is it. So I won't spend too long on this, because generally it's the same principles as we were talking before. It's making the most out of your grenade. But of course, the one difference on this is we're not going to be using the grenade to actually damage things, because you're consuming the grenade with this, and the arc soul doesn't count as grenade or melee or anything on there. It's very powerful. It just doesn't loop in very well into to anything, because it doesn't count as grenades or melees or ability use or anything like that when it is doing damage. So we're going to use grenade kickstart to, of course, using our grenade to get back those charges. When we're using our melee, we want our melee to give us back our grenade and our ability, because Deja Vu, our ability, is going to give us back our grenade on there. And then making the most out of ionic charges there. We need our healing because arc and orb restoration, just because I needed a 4 here, so I put that in. But of course, you could put in innovation or absolution into that slot there as well. So as for the fragments and the aspects of this, because we're not going to be using grenades, we're going to have to take a very different approach to this. And the central point is electrostatic mine. So collecting an ionic trace makes you amplified. So we want to try and stay amplified as long as we can. The reason for that is because while you're amplified, your arc special weapon final blows create a blinding explosion. So you are very locked into the weapons that you're using here, because you're going to want to be using an arc special weapon Rapidly defeating targets while your amplified creates an all the power. So again, making the most out of our amplified. Arc weapon final blows have a chance to create an ionic trace. So ionic traces make you amplified, and it all feeds back into that. And again, we're going to be using arc weapons mostly because we're going to be making the most out of the spark of beacons. And I use spark of resistance. So while you're surrounded by combats, you're more resistant to incoming damage. But I would say it's a little bit optional that. Just don't use anything that is too grenade based on that final slot. And essentially with this, the gameplay loop is you're consuming your grenade to give you back the arc, and then you're just playing like you would normally on there. But that is the best I have for arc, eventually. But anyway, I hope you found that useful, and you go and enjoy the world, you devilish demons.